Okay, welcome to the Tilt Dialogues podcast. This is episode 4. We talk about things like love and community and meaning and how they create health and well-being. It's our 4th episode, and today we have Leah Findley-Jennings. She is the managing director at the Heart Consciousness Church is it still affiliated with Harbin Hot Springs?
Yes, we're doing business as Harbin Hot Springs.
Doing business as Harbin Hot Springs,
Yeah.
okay. And it says here that you're a nudist cult. Is that true?
Wow, just jump right in.
Yeah.
Okay, no.
It's not true.
It is not true.
Okay.
It is not true. But if you ask a local, Heart Consciousness Church was founded nearly 50 years ago in 1975. After it was purchased in 1972 by Robert Hartley, and he started a nonprofit structured as a church called Heart Consciousness. And the locals will tell you that we are a nudist colony, and that comes from a long history of the property being derelict and overrun by, frankly, hippies from the time. And there was some Hell's Angel activity and some drugs and also the locals are known for coming up after football games when they were teenagers and hanging out in the decrepit old cold pool.
Wow.
Pools. So that perception lingers, and we're working really hard to change that because we see ourselves as a retreat center. There was a lot of talk over the decades of whether we were a resort or a retreat. And I think that came from decades of the business building. We haven't talked about the Valley Fire, but before that we had 1,000 people there a day, and so it felt resorty. But it was always a church that owned the hot springs. And I need to back up for a minute.
Sure.
So I want to do a land acknowledgement.
Absolutely.
So I'm also the spiritual director. That's my other title there. And we like to start our ministerial events with the acknowledgement that we are on the land of the Lake Miwok. And Harbin has a very long history because of the hot springs of natives meeting there for ceremony and to talk about community. And they talked about trade, and they just generally gathered to make sure they were in communication with each other. And they gathered with the Pomo and the Wapo.
And those are the local tribes here?
Those are the local tribes, yes. And we honor their elders and we welcome their wisdom. So, thank you.
How's that? What has that relationship been like between the church and then the indigenous communities around here?
There hasn't been much of one.
Yeah.
We've long had a policy of allowing natives to be on the land for free. That's a whole other political discussion for another person probably, because we ask them to show their tribal card, and not all natives have a tribal card because it's a totally political endeavor about who's recognized and who's not. We have a tribe, the LM, I don't think are recognized in our area as a federally recognized tribe. So it's a bit of a sticking point, and it's a thing I really wonder how we can fix that, because it's there's many things to being native that are required beyond the card. It's your lineage, your tribe, and you participate in the culture. So they can't show up at our reception and prove that. And the card stands in for that, but it's not a good system.
It's strange how can you be truly sovereign if you need to get recognition from the federal
Right?
government? Yeah.
Yes.
And but you feel it around here. You feel the presence, and it's not just because of the casino, and it's not just because one of the tribal elders is
Supervisor.
the
Board of
supervisor
supervisors.
here.
Yeah.
There is still a presence, and it's hard to put my finger on it.
Yeah, I totally agree. So there's something really special. What I like about what's happening now is there's more acknowledgement that lands were stolen and violence was done and genocide was, what they were working on back then. And the land itself speaks to us. So there's the hot springs is present because of the geology. Because we're in the Ring of Fire, we have many volcanoes actually around us. So the magma is closer to the surface, and you can feel it. They're at Harbin. There's been some history of people who have been unhinged by it, and that I know when I moved there from Los Angeles in 1996, I learned pretty quickly, and I didn't really know why. It took a long time to figure out, but that I couldn't live on property like we did back then. There were about 100 or so people that lived there in 1996 until the fire in 2015. And I learned that I had to live in one of the properties around town. We owned several what we call resident housing properties. And to keep myself balanced, I had to live off the land if I was going to work there.
Because of the power associated with the land?
Yes, because it can feel, for me, my experience was jangly. And there have been several instances where people have lost touch with reality. And it was attributed to, maybe the land, maybe the energy of that.
Yeah.
So you can feel it.
You can definitely feel it.
And we have a staff now that because the resident housing was all burned up in the fire, we have a staff that live outside of the gates, outside of the land of Harbin, and they feel it too.
Is it? Yeah, I wonder, because I know because up on the land, up on the property, there's no drug use permitted. That's off the table, right?
Correct.
So we should be attributing any sort of unhingedness to the land itself.
Okay, so that's another perception people have of us, that we're some drug-addled nudist cult.
Right.
So we strongly discourage the use of drugs because being on the land itself is enough. You can really alter your reality if you're paying attention. So that's another thing we're working on, so that people don't plan to be altered there.
And being in hot springs and using something like alcohol or something could be quite dangerous. So.
Yes, yeah, it can actually kill you, and you can pass out and hit your head on something, and it's everybody who's ever used a hot tub has seen the sign. So this is even more than that, because it's natural hot water out of the ground. It is volcanically heated, and it's cooled from cold water right out of another spring. So, and it's fresh water. It's living water. So you don't want to mess with that.
Yeah.
It's powerful enough.
Okay, so that's good. I wanted to set the stage that it's something sacred and not as much. I'll read like the San Francisco Chronicle is like nudist resort, like that sort of thing. But this is a sacred space, and people are free to express themselves in that sacred space.
Yes. The other thing I think from the past, so since it was purchased in '72, back then it was a different era, and people were really exploring themselves, and there was a lot of drugs. And over the years, over the decades, there's been different things people have used to alter their experience. And people are microdosing now, and people are more, it's in the New York Times and the major newspapers, Wall Street Journal, about this use of things that alter you. But what you're saying is absolutely true. If you really pay attention to the water and being on the land, you don't need that.
Right.
Yeah, so self-exploration can take place many, many ways.
And is that how the church comes in, as a facilitator of sort of bridging between that power and then the and personal experience, or how does the church play in?
I think it's an honoring of the human experience. So Robert Hartley, who goes by Ishvara, his teacher gave him the name Ishvara, which means Lord Creator of the universe, which he did. He created a whole universe. He came from the humanist movement, and he was a Gestalt therapist. So all experiences were welcomed. And so the church, especially in its current iteration, we're bringing the church more forward than it's been in the past. And say something like our events program is intentionally oriented to things that are personal growth oriented, but also fun. Like, the singing bowls are really they're a sacred experience.
And these are the crystal
bowls. Yeah, and then we have new moon and full moon ceremonies, and we do the turn of the wheel, which is the 8 earth-based holidays. So we're refocusing our intention. It's possible the intention was for a long time just to make money and to support the resident community. Oh, I forgot to bring the statement of consciousness, but in that, it talks about our intention is to be a source and a resource for people doing their work. And our intention is to be stewards of the land and stewards of the business, and to run it in such a way that we're in integrity with being a fully realized human. That's a big job.
And when you think about being a fully realized human, what are those boundaries? I know you were talking about the indigenous connection as well. And does that boundary stop? Like, how do you define the self when you're talking about fully realized? Is that does that also integrate the community? Does that how does the community play into that, or how does time play into that?
Wow, that's an interesting question. That's so we've been around for nearly 50 years, so we have the time. And we had a reset with this National Disaster Valley fire in 2015. We had a reset or a reboot. And we've also had a reset or a reboot through time because our management aged out. So we have a thread of history from the kind of disorganized hippie, let it flow, it is what it is thing, to a reality now, especially after COVID and the Me Too movement, of there are boundaries and parameters to what people expect, I'll say, in terms of safety. So there's many answers to what you're asking me, but there's as many experiences as there are people. So as long as, I think the boundary is as long as nobody is hurt, and that we are able to say what's true for us. I'm not sure I'm answering your question, but through time and space, we've learned. It was the Wild West when it first started, and Harbin now, the Heart Consciousness Church, has more structure.
Yeah.
We're a little more. We have outside forces keeping us in integrity with laws and the current. I don't know what the situation is called. The current need for people to be able to speak their truth and have their own boundaries, and for that to be acknowledged, not to be run over. So the church, let me see. I say what we're really interested in there is that everybody still be in touch with their self in a spiritual way, and whatever that means to them. And so it doesn't mean, like I said, running over or hurting anybody else.
Yeah. That's something we struggle with a lot, like when we talk about love in the organization to other people. And I think a lot of people would define it as unconditional love means you can't have boundaries. But the way that we often think about it is there's nothing outside of unconditional love. So boundaries are part of it. And if you do love your community, then you have to respect those boundaries with one another.
Right. So we did learn over the years that it was important to have, like a resident handbook. This is how we are with each other. And you can do this, but you can't do that. And I think it's really important for there to be structure so that people know what it is. And those things can be fluid. I mean, if you're in a good community and they can talk about something that doesn't work and you can modify to something that does work, then I think it's pretty good.
Yeah. That's another thing that comes up is what structure enables freedom? Like, how much freedom can you give up to enable a lot more freedom? Which sounds counterintuitive. And, I'm about as liberty oriented as you can be, probably towards the anarchist side, but there's definitely something where if you don't have a necessary framework, then people aren't able to actually live within their freedom.
There's also a thing about fairness there too. If I know there's not exceptions, or we had a lot of exceptions to rules in the past, and we try now to be more, this is the parameter, and please stay within that. Don't ask us to make an exception.
Yeah.
Because it's not fair to somebody who didn't get the exception. And we don't want exceptionalism.
Yeah.
Because how is that fair? It's not equal.
No.
Maybe things aren't equal, but they definitely need to be fair.
Well, I mean, life isn't fair or equal, but
Yeah.
we can create voluntary structures that have rules that make things a little bit more fair and equal. Yeah, I like that. And with everybody there voluntarily, how do you come to a consensus on what the rules should be from within the church?
So we have this. We have some concentric circles of management. We have a board. We have managing directors from the board who do daily operations. We have department managers. We have the staff. We have the members who we're a membership organization because the state of California requires it with nudity. So we get feedback. The managing directors tend to make and set policy, but it's never without a lot of input.
Yeah, from the community?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, the community means it used to mean residents. You paid dues and you lived in one of our houses, mostly in the ancient past, and we yeah, I'm sorry, I'm just going back to the part that we have a lot of input all over.
Yeah.
Nobody is quiet about how they feel about anything that's going on.
And you've got different stakeholders. You've got employees, and you've got the customers, and then you've got this larger town, which you have to. I mean, we all saw the wild country where
Yeah.
they were at odds with their surrounding, the people who are surrounding them. So you've got those stakeholders, and how do you balance all of those sort of competing, demands or agendas or whatever?
Yeah, we're in new territory now because really Harbin was a bubble.
Yeah.
We are still meeting that reality we're constantly surprised by people who live locally who don't know there's a hot springs 4 miles out of Middletown.
Yeah.
I mean, people who have lived here a long time, even, or people who are new to the area. So we're, because has to change, and it is changing because our staff are locals. We don't have a residential community. That I showed up from another place, and I moved to a job at Harbin, and I lived in Harbin housing. And people were just starting to move outside of the Harbin property to live in other things around town. But now our staff is, local. So that's starting to change how we're getting out of the bubble. The bubble isn't possible anymore. And we're doing outreach too. We're participating more in the Merchant Association and the Luncheon Club. These are things that are old timers kind of events, and we show up and we talked about who we are and who we're not. Yeah. And we didn't show up naked.
We didn't. Yeah.
So always good, and we're branching out a little bit more into community funds, so the locals can know who we are, because local really is the future, right? I mean, at the moment we still have people still have the ability to come and visit us from far away by jet and then by car.
Yeah.
So we want to make sure we're locally known as well as internationally known.
That's what really I think surprised me when I came here. So the first time I came up, they had a ride share, and I had a van. So I was like, does anybody else want to ride to Harbin? And I was in San Francisco at the time, and the responses I got were from these two old Russian ladies, and their old Russian husbands loaded them into the van and stuff like that. I was like, oh, that's wild. And then I came up, and there was just people. I thought it was all going to be Bay Area aging hippies, but there was people from Japan, and there was people from the Ukraine and Russia, and all over the place. And that was a really neat experience. And I was also really impressed with when they had the residents there, sort of creating social norms. It didn't matter how many different cultures were being blended in; they were all able to be integrated into those social norms. So there was things that you do and you don't do in the pools. There's things that you do and you don't. And I thought that was really impressive, the way that you had created the culture here, that people could just, there weren't a lot of signs even. It was just like the normative social pressure on here's how you behave. I thought that was really neat.
It was easier when we had residents, because we had residents who were setting the field.
Yeah.
And the vibe, and that was a bubble, definitely. It's a little harder now because there aren't the energy of the new people, and we still have 50% or more of our visits are first timers, which is quite a lot.
That's
in the
a lot.
8 years since the fire. So their energy, it can be overwhelming to the bubble.
Yeah.
Because there's mostly staff, and there's not so many residents lounging in the pools.
Yeah.
And there's not we just started a workshops program, but we used to have a conference center that 120 people were around. They were in their workshop bubble. There were a lot of focus on love.
Right.
And they were spreading that, making that field. So that is a part that's missing. It's a structural problem, actually, with what we want to achieve. How we want love to be, the main. It's not just it's that retreat resort thing. Are you here to just have fun, which is not a bad thing,
Yeah.
but are you here to experience something and have a meaningful visit?
And that would be the retreat, where it's self-development. Like that kind of, I was looking at the history, and it was almost like a sanitarium.
It was a sanitarium.
It was a sanitarium.
Yeah, in the Victorian ages. It's had several iterations. It's burned down want to say 5 or 6 times now.
Yeah.
And it was a boxing camp. It was a sanitarium.
Yeah. Right.
There has been more than one retreat center, more than one Victorian hot spring center in this canyon. So lots of different businesses.
So you had, I'm trying to put the arc together. There's they had the Victorian era stuff. There was the Wild West hippies.
Yeah.
There was sort of into the 90s new agey.
Yes.
And balancing being a community with being a business. You had the Valley Fire, and now you're rebuilding. And I'm just curious, what was because I know the community meant a lot to a lot of people, and it was, in my opinion, keeping people alive in a way. What was the impact of the Valley Fire on the church and the community surrounding the church, and how have you been recovering from that impact?
Well, we lost 95% of our buildings and business. We were nearly completely wiped out.
And the temple.
A barn survived.
Yeah.
Some random laundry building survived. We lost 100% of the community. And since the fire, my personal mission was to keep us together in some version of that. And people have had to move away from the area because 30% of the housing was lost in that fire.
Yeah.
And so they've gone out into the world and they've tried to come back and they've left again. And we still have a contingent of people who have remained. But we're very small compared to what we were. We were 240 people working at the business, and 40 of those were locals, and the rest were residents. So and I talked about aging out. A lot of our resident populations age out of being able to work,
right,
or wanting to work. So we've turned to, in a way, it's opened us up to the world, right? We've had to open up the bubble to bring in locals who work for us, and luckily they understand what we're doing and they love it. They love the land, they love the people, they love being of service, they love the meaning and the purpose of working for the church and the hot springs and the land and the water and the people. But it's a tough go because structurally we are we're without the container of the community, and until we fix that, it's just going to be a different, not a different intention, but a different way of achieving the same outcome.
Yeah.
Making love in the world, having, a place where people can come and feel safe to explore who they are, and to be with other people who are hopefully doing the same thing.
And hopefully love can sort out what that pathway looks like.
Yeah, if they come from his love, we talk about heart consciousness that way. Ishvara, the founder, has also called it oneness,
right.
Which is, with oneness you can have many points of truth, many people, many ideas, many intentions, but it all comes together somehow.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
I hope so. And I remember pre-fire, it kind of mirrors this idea of the inverting demographic pyramid that the United States and a lot of other countries are having, and pre-fire, I remember there was one of the beautiful things about it was you had these 80-year-old folks who had been here since the 70s, and they were just kind of enjoying their twilight years, and then you had these new, yoga instructors and stuff coming in, and then you had middle-aged folks, and it seems like just like as we're experiencing a reduction in new births in this country, but the community is being bolstered by immigration. It seems like you're facing something really similar where you lost most of the community, but you're sort of bringing in people from the outside to keep and then struggling with how do you make sure that the culture is like what's the right balance of people bringing in new culture from outside and then being able to set those norms from the inside. I think it's a really interesting experiment. Like I don't know how it's going to turn out. Like I've definitely seen things I really like about the new Harbin, and especially being church centered. And then there's some things that also it seems like y'all are working out still.
So, what I notice is I've been there a long time, and there are people I lovingly refer to as the kids. It's you 40-year-olds that are, you've achieved mastery, and you will be in charge pretty quick. So I notice, I watch what the younger people who are in management at Harbin want, and try to inform them with the past and the intention and the orientation and the mission, which we do. Like we start our department manager meetings lots of people there are 20 years younger than me. Our management team, two of us are in our 60s, one's in her 70s, and one's in her 40s. And then the department managers, half of them are probably 40 or younger. No, more than half. Maybe it's 3/4. So it's important to do both. It's important to set the stage, talk about what's important, and then turn and say, what do you think, and where are we going? What's up? What we're trying to impart, how did it land on you, and what are we going to do with that?
Yeah.
What do we do with the past? So we do try time travel quite a bit, because I do find myself saying, well, here's what we used to do. And, here's why I think we did that. And then how does it fit? What do you want to do with that?
Yeah.
Because we still have quite a bit of our membership are still aging hippies. And, I'll give you an example. We tried to do wristbands because we do have some trouble with people sneaking in.
Yeah.
And the older, knowledgeable crowd, that did
No
not
wristbands.
go well. No.
It was like Coachella or something.
Yeah, we had even worse characterizations of it.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I see. What do the younger people want? Like when you say they've achieved mastery, like how does that interact with what what does that look like?
Well, I acknowledge and I see that they're raising families, and they're buying houses, and they're grown-ups, and they have valuable input for what the world should be and look like. And there is still the energy and the concern. And, anybody younger than 60 is the future. Things happen as you get older that both diminish your ability to affect change. And what I mean by that is maybe the older you get, maybe the more you want the status quo to remain.
Yeah.
And that's not a good thing at this particular moment in history. We need creativity, we need love, we need innovation, we need community, and we need people coming up from behind. And maybe that just makes me an old hippie. I'm not really sure, probably. But,
Oh, it's neat that you recognize the entrenched, how easy it is to get entrenched, and how you're actively trying not to let the organization be entrenched. Like that's probably a really good start.
I hope so.
In the future, how do you see love and heart consciousness playing a role in how the future is forged for your organization?
Well, let's see. So we're starting a farm. I see the future needs a lot of local structure, and we need local food, which we don't currently have. We currently have cannabis and wine, grapes. That's okay. And for a while, we were growing housing, which may or may not happen with some of the developments that are going in.
Right.
So we're starting a farm to provide local food.
Cannabis and grape farm.
No, a food farm.
Oh, okay.
A food
What are you
farm.
growing?
Well, we'll be growing food. I mean, kale, and we'll have a grazing part to that, and so we'll have sheep. Um, there will be a mixture of things. Some of it oriented toward what we serve in the restaurant, and some of it oriented to staff needs for food, what we'd like to grow. It'll be a mix of things. There'll be an orchard, sheep, like I said. So that'll be a local resource, and it's 37 acres, so it could put out some food.
And where is the expertise coming from for growing?
Well, at the moment, we're at the very start of it. So we got a federal grant from the CDFA to plan. And so then Brenda Quintero, our grants manager for this project, she engaged local experts for the grazing portion, the carbon farming portion. There's several different elements to it, and so the grant pays for the expertise, soil testing, soil management, and then from there we're engaging local people to help us with it, and as we look for other kinds of grants to help us implement the programs, and we fundraise, we turn to our staff. There's a lot of people who come forward and say, I'd really like to help.
Yeah.
So, and our membership is over 100,000 people. So we've got some people with cred who want to help. And they love the church, they love the land, they love the business, they love the people. So I think the future looks pretty good there.
There's so much community support. Like, that was one thing, whenever I would talk to anybody who had been to Harbin, like for many of them, it was a transformative experience, and they have a really special connection with the land. And I think when you treat the land as a member of the community, you mentioned the land acknowledgements and how you're trying to be non-exploitative. And, like, how are you thinking of the land as part of the community?
So I think of the land as I want to say a being, or at least an energy. So one thing I learned in ministerial training was we learned to invite the directions in, which many cultures do that. So the Celts do that, the natives do that, and in myself, I couldn't understand that there are 7 directions, and the below is one of them. That's the planet itself, and that it has it gives us direction and guidance, and it absolutely has a wisdom that if we slow down enough to listen to it, we'll stop hurting it and each other. Did you ever read Starhawk's book, The Fifth Sacred Thing?
No.
So when they do council in this book, they represent the trees. They represent the water. They
As
represent
stakeholders in decision making?
Yes.
Interesting.
A human takes that role.
Okay.
And speaks.
Wow.
And so we're not quite there yet. But we do talk a lot about, especially in the statement of consciousness, which is the thing that it's our mission statement. These things are named, that we're stewards of, and we invite, feedback from, and we acknowledge that they have a necessary place. And I've been working on a hierarchy. So most corporations have the pyramid, and ours is more, we have a beautiful graphic that Jocelyn Howie made of the directions, and it's more of a circle than it is our current one is like boxes and kind of sort of, it's still a kind of sort of pyramid. Even though it doesn't have a one at the top. So each of these things feed into each other, and it's necessary and unavoidable, if you want to say it that way. But if you want to really take into consideration everything that's important, you have to include it all.
Yeah.
Which is a big task, and you do have to slow down, and it's not just making money or even just are people happy. It's, are you not taxing the water resources too much? Are you, are you paying attention to, land erosion, and I don't know, how are you treating the resources that you have, which are finite, right? Okay, so love isn't finite, but the resources that we're given, we're on a giant spaceship.
Yeah.
And, if we poison all the water, it's not going to work very well for us.
Right.
But if we learn to work with these energies, I won't anthropomorphize them, but, I refer to them as beings, but really they're energies. They're things that are constantly in play.
Yeah. That's a really neat idea, giving voice to those explicitly. And I know, running organizations, we always run into this issue of efficiency, where the more stakeholders are having a voice, the slower things happen and the slower your growth is. And I think there's a knee-jerk response to that's not okay. But maybe, Switzerland does pretty well. Most of the decisions are made at the canton level, and sort of federally, almost nothing can get done because you need I think you need unanimous consent, or it's some very high bar for what can get done, and they're doing really, really well by not being able to get very much done at the peak of the hierarchy. And we're experimenting with decentralized autonomous organizations and that sort of thing, and what's the right balance between efficiency and effectiveness and doing things the right way.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we're trying to err on doing things the right way, and it sounds like Heart Consciousness Church is as well. Mm-hmm. And that's really good to see. Maybe the growth is a little slower, but it comes out better.
Yeah, there's definitely something intrinsically slow about bureaucracy. I've seen that numerous times in participating with things, but I think the main thing there, decentralization can work, but there has to be trust, right? That the intention and the intention in the work will be accurate.
Mm-hmm.
And then there has to be room for forgiveness, because you have to know that somebody's going to hear something and they're not going to understand it.
Yeah.
Or maybe they didn't quite get the intention, or they have a whole other idea. And then, you have to stop and check that out, and see if it's true, the new thing that got introduced.
Yeah.
Because, things evolve. Organizations evolve. Hopefully they evolve.
Yeah, they have to.
Yeah.
And then trust buffers, all those little misunderstandings, trust can buffer against those, however you think of it, up the hierarchy or across the chain of command, or, what the leadership looks like. And
yeah.
Yeah, that's huge.
And also access to the leaders, everybody can be a leader in their own way, but a lot of people don't want the responsibility or the accountability. But they do have something they need, that could benefit the organization because they're doing the work.
Yeah.
And if you're in the front line, you know more than somebody who hasn't done the work.
Yeah.
So it's important for the leadership to listen to it and take it into account, and hopefully apply it as they can, as can be, makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And one of the, go ahead.
I was going to say, did you hear this thing about, I think it's Exxon? They're making a move so that their stockholders don't have any say in
So you can't have activist investors.
Well, yes, you can't have activist investors. I was like, well, that's really interesting because that was the whole point of this. You buy in, I'm going to give you your money and I'm going to have say.
Yeah.
And they're moving to take that away. It's just, it's so interesting. But the world, it's another authoritarian kind of, move.
Oh, it's going to bite them in the ass eventually, because if you stop listening to people who actually are doing things, then you crumble.
Yeah.
But, oh well, I mean, I'm sure Exxon knows what they're doing. But like, we talk about creating shared value, and I've worked with a few companies in the past who are like, we want to have a shared value model where we're creating value for all the stakeholders, except we don't want to relinquish any control over
Right.
it. Well, then you don't want actual creating shared value. You want shareholders,
Right.
So that's a tricky thing to do. And then, but I think tools like devil's advocacy and stuff are really good at overcoming groupthink and diffusion of responsibility. So it seems like it's good for an organization to have all the new blood, as long as you have your core values. That, and one of those things that I always thought was interesting about Harbin and the church was no technology, or limited technology, especially up by the pools and all the sacred spaces. And as our organization, we create apps, and we're very tech heavy. But
Right.
I'm curious what you think the link is between technology and community, and why those policies are in place up by the pools.
So no cameras around the pool, so no technology, because if anything has a possibility of taking a picture of
Right.
naked people,
Yeah.
we don't want that, because the privacy of our members is sacrosanct.
Yeah.
You've got to have trust that you're safe. And I'm not opposed to technology, and we're not opposed to technology, because our business runs on the internet and websites and digital currency, digital banking. So there's a place for me. Technology, the importance of technology is the access to information, right? Not to do business, but information. I think that hopefully makes people smarter.
Hopefully.
And then also, because of social media and the negative effects it has on people, it's nice to have places where you're not doing that. So if you have limited service, or you have an area that you can't Facebook in, you can relax.
Yeah.
You can let it go.
No matter how good you look up by the pools, nobody gives you a like for it. So there's no influencers up there. Well, I'm sure there's influencers, but no digital influencers.
Yes. We really ask people not to take pictures. Even, also there's a thing about have your experience. Like, really have your experience. You don't have to document it.
Yeah.
And I'm a huge Facebooker. I love it, and I love it because of the aspect of positivity and connection and love that people can show to each other. The rest of it, don't want to participate in.
Yeah. I think Rimbaud had a quote, I think it was, I is someone else. And that's how I feel when I go up to the pools, where it's like, there's not a lot of judgment. There's not even a lot of potential for judgment. And when you're, in your birthday suit, everybody looks ridiculous. So like everybody is, sort of on a level playing field up there. And not only is it a digital detox, but it's also a detox from sort of the abstract conceptions. And it's gotten different since I've known the organization a little bit more. So it's not less magical, but it's like less mysterious, I think. But still, it feels like all the abstracts about who you are and who everybody else wants you to be, you get a break from that. And that's one of the most powerful things. It's a relief.
What a relief, yeah.
And it melts away into the pools.
Yeah. I also have to say here, so there is something about younger people are wearing their suits.
Right.
Yeah, and I'm not totally sure what that's about, but they're free to do that. It's an unconditional pool experience.
Yeah.
If you feel comfortable to take your clothes off and you want that, you do that. If you don't, you don't.
Yeah.
And it could be that there's so many new people.
I think that might be it. Like when it was 95% of people setting that normative expectation, it's easier to.
Yeah, that's what I experienced the first time I went. I was very tightly wrapped in my towel because I just did not believe that people were naked on purpose. And what was fun about that? And why are they doing that? And I got there and I sat for a moment and looked around and everybody was naked and they weren't looking at me.
Nobody cares.
They didn't care. And it was, it was like, and Ishvara has said that the nudity is freedom.
Yeah.
So if you drop it all, you find you don't need it. And it was always interesting there because you had to meet people twice. You had to meet them once naked and then once in the queue of their clothes, because the clothes gave all kinds of clues to who they are and what they believed and what their status was. And it was super interesting, but I never recognized anybody the first time I saw them naked or clothed.
Yeah.
Because, naked, you look at their face, and then when you have clothes on, you look at the whole kind of indicators.
And there's the two styles of hugs. There's the naked hug, and then there's the clothed hug.
That's the Donald Duck hug.
The Donald Duck hug?
Yeah, if you're just touching at the top and you're...
I see. You got
your genitals away.
That's right. That's right. That could be your slogan. Genitals away. That should be our slogan. Yeah. Is there anything else that you want to talk about?
Thank you for the opportunity to talk about this, and thank you for the work that you're doing in the world, because I do find it super interesting. I listened to the previous podcasts and I found them really interesting, and I love the talk about people who are associated with Tilt or working in major, massive corporations and coming at that work. I heard Lockheed with love.
Yeah.
And it's not easy to put those two things in the same place. So I appreciate that.
I think it's the only way that it's gonna, as much of an anarchist as I am, you have to have a parallel structure, but also there's this giant leviathan that needs nurturing as well. So we're trying to come at it from both ends. So it's really nice having you here, and it's nice seeing Harbin and the church rebuilding. That was a really important piece of my life, and I know when I talk to people, it's transformative for them. So I'm glad you're doing the work you're doing as well.
Thank you very much. All
right, Leah Findley-Jennings from Harbin Hot Springs / the Heart Consciousness Church. It's a good episode.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Leah.